Welcome, everyone. Jim Yankech. Jim comes to us with a lot of years of experience. He worked at UNL for 25 years, mainly in the human resources area.
Yes.
And now he is instructor for several different universities, including Midland, UNL, and Rice. And so Jim's going to talk to us about his journey. Oh, and most importantly, he owns his own company. Jim and I connected initially because he's providing some course through Dana here at SCC. And we had gotten some feedback from our Focus Suites members that they were interested in some HR information. And so Jim and I connected that way, and then we're looking forward to having Jim come for our Focus Suites members to be able to do a lunch and learn in September sometime. So I'll let you go ahead and take the floor, Jim. Thank you for coming today.
No, thank you, Amy, and thanks for the invitation. I'll tell a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am, and then I'm sure I hope you'll have some follow-up questions and others as well. But as Amy said, my name's Jim Yankech. I'll start sooner and then I'll go back. I was a non-traditional PhD student. I earned my PhD in 2015 from University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And what initiated that was working at UNL for 25 years, as Amy said. Saw a lot of my colleagues progress through the ranks, so to say, earn advanced degrees, and noticed that there are a variety of ceilings within employment, within professions, and figured out that earning a PhD would be advantageous to me even at that point in my career. So I finished up my PhD work in 2015, primarily focuses on educational administration. But it covers a lot of topics such as HR and organizational behavior and organizational development. But to go back further, my undergraduate degree is in psychology. However, though, when I was in my undergrad program, I took a lot of computer science classes, and my very first job out of college was working for what was then called Sperry Univac. And I'm not sure, I forget the name of the company that they morphed into, but they were purchased. But my story starts right there, because within 2 months of graduation, I was laid off. There was a massive shift within the IT field at that point in time. So basically what happened is I had to fall back on my psychology degree and began working for a residential treatment center back in my hometown, which is right outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Well, that's where I met my wife. A year later, after we got married, a year after that, we had our first child, and then a year after that, we moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. My wife is from Nebraska, so that's how I ended up here in Nebraska. Our daughter was 9 months old. My wife said, it'd be really nice if we could live closer to my family. I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. And we've been here since. So Philadelphia is my hometown, but Lincoln is certainly home. So really then, that's really when my career, I guess, really started to progress and take form. And for the first 12 years of my career, I worked as a mental health clinician in a variety of settings. I mentioned the residential treatment center. Then I worked in crisis intervention for both Chester County, Pennsylvania, and then also Lancaster County here. When I first moved here, I worked for the Lancaster County Community Mental Health Center in crisis intervention. Worked for a treatment facility in Seward for a brief period of time, and then was hired at UNL, which was my entrance into UNL, as an employee assistance program counselor, which was probably also my entrance into human resources as well. I was able to transition my career after about 3 years working in the employee assistance program at UNL. I transitioned into employee relations at UNL, and then following that, became the HR director and associate director for the Student Health Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And just to kind of give you some context, as you know, UNL's overall student enrollment is approximately 25,000. Our Student Health Center, our annual visits totaled roughly 40,000. We had a comprehensive outpatient clinic, including primary care. We had an on-site pharmacy, on-site dental clinic, physical therapy, radiology, lab, So I want to create that context because many student health centers at colleges and universities are nurse-led and are very small in terms of the scope of services that they offer. But we had about 80 employees. Our budget when I left was about $10 million. So it was a fairly large operation. Something else that was instrumental in my career, one of the duties I took on while working at the UNL Student Health Center was administering the student health insurance plan. And as most things that morphed over time as well, we were impacted by the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Our plan was ACA compliant. And at the time I left UNL, I think our annual premiums in revenue for the student insurance plan were around $8 million. We had about 3,000 students enrolled. So again, I mean, we crafted that very carefully to enhance the revenue for the different student health centers within the University of Nebraska system. But again, that's part of my HR experience as well, spending quite a bit of time working in the health insurance field. After leaving the student health center, I then worked for a private equity-owned insurance company, and they had one of their divisions was offering student health insurance plans. So I worked with them for 2 years, and then after that is when I began teaching at the college and university level. The courses that I teach primarily focus on human resource management, organizational behavior, leadership development, and for a year at University of Nebraska-Kearney, I taught healthcare management and healthcare policy. And I, as you could probably tell, I mean, I enjoy variety. I'm always looking for challenges. It inspires me, but it's a way for me to learn. And in fact, I tell students that each and every class I teach at the very beginning, I said, look, I'm going to learn as much this semester as you will, because we're going to share. In all of my classes, I have students, I call it knowledge contribution. And one of the things that they have to do on a weekly basis is contribute to the knowledge of that topic that we're talking about that week. So that's just one way that I continue to learn as well, and one of the things I enjoy about teaching. After about a year ago, it actually happened. I heard about this happening to other people, but it actually happened to me. It actually happened to me. A recruiter reached out to me. She found me on LinkedIn, and she asked if I was interested in teaching for Rice University. Well, that got my attention, and that's exactly what happened. So 2 months later, my first class for Rice University was I taught that July of last year, of 21. And not surprisingly, the Rice program is completely online as compared to UNL. I still actively teach at UNL. That's usually a mix of in-person, online, hybrid classes. And then, again, through networking, I reached out to Midland University last fall, met with Todd Conkright, who's the dean of the Dunklowell School of Business. We connected in December. In February, he reached out and said, hey, do you want to teach a couple of courses for us this fall? So in 3 weeks, I guess, on the 30th, I'll be teaching on campus for Midland as well, teaching what they call human capital management. Some schools call it human resource management. Midland was very intentional. Content's pretty much the same, but you can tell the focus that Midland has named their course human capital management. And then I'll also be teaching a business ethics course. And then also last year, started networking with Dana Myers, as Amy said, and Dana and I have worked diligently over the past year or so to develop a human resource certification program that will be offered through continuing education here at Southeast Community College. And one of the nice things, and this is actually an inspiration from Dana, was that since 1997, I have had the SPHR certification through Human Resource Certification Institute. There are two main certification bodies within the HR field. One, and probably more popular, so to say, would be SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. They offer a variety of certifications, but there's a second certification agency body called Human Resource Certification Institute. And I've been certified as a senior professional in human resource management since 1997. Dana was inspired, and I think it's a great idea, is a great value add to the program that we've developed, is that I will gear the content of the upcoming certificate program to also help students sit for the APHR certification exam through the Human Resource Certification Institute. And it's really an introductory certification for employees who perhaps have taken on some new HR responsibilities all of a sudden. Maybe somebody resigned the following week, somebody comes to work on Monday morning, boss walks up and says, guess what, you're our new HR person. So, I mean, it would be, perfect class for that individual who all of a sudden has become the HR expert for their organization. But for other individuals who are looking to expand their career possibilities as well. So that's another value add to the HR certificate program that will be offered this fall, is the really tailored to help the students sit for the APHR exam, certification exam. Another value add would be that we've built in the opportunity for students, if they want to consult with me following the class for a period of time, just to help them address any HR policies, challenges that they might have at work. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I believe the first session, we're offering 2 sessions, one on a Thursday afternoon and then one on a Saturday morning. And there are a total of 7 sessions, and just because of the holidays, and I had a scheduling conflict one week, I think we begin early October and early December. So very much looking forward to working with Dana and others here at Southeast relative to launching that certificate program. So that's kind of my story. Oh, and as you said, a few years ago, I guess there's one other chapter here, one other element that is really developing. I mean, it's developing as we speak, as I speak right now. Several years ago, I formed an LLC, which was something I thought about doing when I left UNL. But when I left the insurance company, it's like, okay, now's the time. And to be quite honest with you, it's still under development. I mean, it's a concept that has changed along the way. As you may already know, I mean, I have a very minimal internet online presence right now, and that's because of that journey, as you said, inviting me to tell my story and talk about my journey. I mean, that's really still developing. Is exactly what is this going to look like? But I think all of these experiences, especially teaching and again working with Dana, I mean, that's where people are reaching out to me. That's where people are contacting me. That's where the communication is happening. That's where there's the outreach. So I think that's kind of the area where it's okay. This seems to be the sweet spot. So how can I continue to develop this and grow that? So yes, it's I've worked with a couple of agencies already, HR consultation, and possibility of some additional customized human resource training as well that might materialize this fall. So that's my story. On my LinkedIn page, the very last sentence, the quote from Emerson, life is a journey, not a destination. And without a doubt, I believe that to be true. It's really about learning from your experiences. It's about being willing to open up some doors, seeing what's behind the doors. It's about talking with other people, establishing relationships, networking, and just seeing what opportunities might be out there. So
I'm guessing that one of your Clifton strengths, your top, is probably learner. Is that one of your top 5?
It is also. The one that really sticks out, though, is deliberative, and I believe achiever is also on the list. But yes, I do describe myself as a lifelong learner, and as I said, I mean, once I accomplish something, it's okay. How can I build upon this, or what's next, or what have I learned from this that might lead to This, when I reflect on this, I mean, actually, this is pretty amazing, even at this point in my life. As I shared at the very beginning, I have a PhD in educational administration. My dad did not finish grade school. My mom did not finish high school. But yet, all of the 4 siblings, all of us ended up with a college degree. So yes, that's another way for me to answer your question, is about being a lifelong learner and valuing education. I've been affiliated with higher education and learning since entering college in some form or fashion. So yeah, I mean, it's all about learning, but it's also about development. It's really about, fulfilling the self, finding the self, and then fulfilling the self.
Well, many of our people that are here are entrepreneurs, have their own businesses. And I guess from our experience, my experience, sometimes the HR piece is maybe neglected a little bit, or like you said, pushed on to somebody who doesn't necessarily have the experience. What would your advice be for that? That's kind of a really open-ended question, but how do you feel entrepreneurs should look at that piece of their business?
Well, first of all, do not watch The Office. Please do not watch reruns of The Office, and don't worry about Toby. That's a really good question, and it's one of my. This past spring, I taught advanced human resource management at Nebraska Wesleyan, and for the final assignment, I invited students to tell me their top 2 strategies in disrupting HR. In other words, how can you change HR? So, HR might have a certain reputation, given your experiences and what have you. But again, I mean, it's really about development. It's mostly about relationships. As Dana and I prepare to promote the program, one of the things that we are focusing in the material is that HR is really about relationships. It's about the relationship between the individual and the organization. It's about the relationship between the individual and their supervisor. It's about the relationship between the individual and their colleagues. And quite honestly, I mean, it's even about the relationship between the risk manager and how well they get along with the insurance company that provides insurance for the employees. I mean, I want to pull that in here, because that relationship, honestly, will, and I can attest to that, I mean, that will impact the premiums for your company, how well you get along with your broker, how long you get along with the agent, how well you get along with the insurance company itself. I mean, those relationships can have a positive impact on plan design and cost of the plan, for example. But again, HR is about relationships. HR is about listening to your employees. I believe that listening is probably the most important communication skill. Now, delivering the message and articulating that message is, of course, important, making sure that people understand the content. But you have to listen initially to figure out what your employees want or what the individual needs. That's really where it starts. I mean, because that will help form your benefits program, for example. That will help form your compensation program, for example. That will help leaders make decisions about any changes that we need to pursue within the culture of the organization, for example. So another part of HR is really about listening to your employees. There are many companies that have sprouted up over the last several years using metrics and analytics, to measure employee sentiment, conduct pulse surveys, for example. And I mean, those are important. That's one way that an organization can listen to its employees. But I also still want to emphasize, though, that's that simple, age-old tradition of simply talking with somebody else and meeting and walking up to them at their desk or during lunch or during break and striking up a conversation and getting to know that person as well. So that's another thing, what I mean by, HR is really about relationships. There is, there is what I'm going to say, perhaps the more boring side of HR, which is compliance. There are a ton of employment laws. Every year, new employment laws are passed that either modify existing ones or add to the list. So yes, part of the responsibility of human resource management is making sure that organizations and employers are in compliance with the laws that apply to their company. Another really important task, responsibility is talent management relative to recruiting candidates, selecting candidates, onboarding candidates, and then what happens once, and then retention as well. I think retention is sometimes overlooked. I think retention can be a bigger challenge to an organization than recruitment. It might be very easy to entice somebody to join your organization. Maybe it's because they're earning a few more dollars per hour. Maybe your benefits look more attractive. But once that person is there, how welcomed do they feel? How engaged do they feel? The individual might have some sense of what the culture is like before they join your organization, but you really don't learn that culture until you're actually part of the organization, and maybe that person becomes disillusioned after 3 months, after 6 months on the job. So that might impact retention as well. So that's another important responsibility of human resource management is looking at retention as well. So yes, it goes beyond compliance. It goes beyond making sure that the I's are dotted, that the T's are crossed. For 4 years of my career, I spent in employee relations. And this is one of the reasons why I say I think one of the most important human resource skills is listening. Because I'm convinced that during those 4 years, I helped the university avoid official complaints and official grievances, and ultimately, I want to believe some lawsuits. And it could very well be the fact that I might have been the very first person that the employee felt listened to them. Employees know that they're not always going to get what they want. Employees know that they're not always going to get their coworker fired. Employees know they're not always going to get their boss fired. Employees know that they're not always going to get a $10 an hour raise. But as long as the employees feel listened to and respected along the way, I think that really adds to the culture and helps that employment relationship. Employees might have a complaint, employees might have a desire, employees might have a request, but they also know that they might not get what they want, but they do want to be heard and they do want to be listened to. And so again, that's one of the reasons why I say listening might be one of the most important communication skills. So there are a lot of areas really within the HR field that people can pursue, that people might have an interest in. Childcare has become central to human resource management. Huddle just announced that they're going to create an on-site childcare center. Excuse me. That's just one example. There was a report that came out also this summer. What I do is if I get a news feed, and I think it's relevant for one of my courses, I will save that feed, file it, and then so I know I have it easily available so I can incorporate it into the class that following semester. Because that really keeps it real, that keeps it live for the students. We're not referencing something that happened back in the 1980s or back in the 1990s. I mean, this is 2022 that we're talking about. But anyway, there was a report that came out about how much money is lost within the economy because of a lack of affordable and accessible childcare, for example. So that's another area that HR is now at least affiliated with, sometimes responsible for even, to making sure that that's available. But I mean, that's another area of human resource management that's critical to the organization and again, I think relevant to retention, for example, and maybe relevant for recruitment as well. But if a family member, if the employee feels that they have access to quality, hopefully affordable childcare services, I mean, that regardless of what industry we're talking about, whether it's Kawasaki, whether it's Huddle, regardless of what industry we're talking about, an issue such as childcare, having access to childcare can be a major factor for that organization. So I think I've answered your question, but I mean HR, there's a lot of variety in human resource management in terms of opportunities and responsibilities. But as I said, I think at the very beginning of my response, I also invite students though to rethink HR and give them a chance to, what can be different, especially from their perspective. I'll finish this because I need a drink of water here pretty quick. But one more comment though. The other thing I asked my students this past spring was, what's more important to you, salary or culture? And they all answered culture. So these are 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, and they are willing to sacrifice some salary, some compensation, so that they have a place to work at where they feel engaged, where it's comfortable, where they like the culture. So I think that's really telling is, yes, I mean, we all work because we either want or need a paycheck, but why do we work there? Why do we keep coming back to that organization? And that's really what these students were reflecting upon is, yeah, money's important, but even more important is the culture of the environment. So that's another HR element where, again, yes, we have compliance to worry about. We have to make sure that we don't want anybody in our company going to jail because a law has been violated. But we also want to make sure that we are doing the best that we can to retain our employees, to provide quality child care, that we are creating a culture that our employees enjoy. So, excuse me.
No. So I guess my next question or comment for you, Jim, would be every day we read in newspapers and publications how disruptive the employment situation is. You talked about retention, you talked about recruitment, and in the, I don't know if we're out of the great resignation stage, have you in your time seen any other era when employment has been this disrupted?
No, I mean, other than, when a cyclical recession might occur, which are, well, they used to be predictable. I mean, a friend I know who is a financial advisor says we're in a recession right now. In fact, he told me that 2 months ago. I asked him, I said, are we coming up on a recession? He goes, no, we're in it right now. But even in the media, you still have people debating, are we in a recession, are we not? The reason I say that is, I mean, for a long time, for the longest time, recessions were almost predictable, but COVID has been such a disruptor. And so in my opinion, I think the labor market is still responding to the disruption of COVID. And no, I mean, I don't think, I've not witnessed or experienced the disruption that we are seeing right now. I mean, I've witnessed disruption, but this is different. I think it's been so disruptive, it's been so unpredictable, and in my opinion, I'm not an economist, but in my opinion, I mean, I think we have another 1 or 2, 3 years maybe for things to kind of really level out. The de facto minimum wage, some people will tell you now is $15. I mean, under federal law, it's still at $7.25, but has the de facto minimum wage become $15? What impact will that have on other professions? In other words, will it require a salary? Will it require other industries to raise wages in order to be able to recruit and retain, as we talked about earlier? And then again, what are the expectations of the employees relative to that culture or to that employment relationship, so that we can move away from this great resignation? There's such a demand right now for workers that it might be easy for employees to find a reason why to leave one employer and go to another. But I think it's going to be a while until all of this settles. It's been very interesting, just noticing what's happened here in Lincoln, Nebraska. For example, Dino's restaurant at 84th and Van Dorn closed. I never expected Dino's to close. They survived COVID, so to say, but I don't know exactly what happened. I assume it was a staffing issue within Dino's. But for example, though, I mean, you have a well-established business that is no longer functioning. I mean, they went out of business, but yet you have other dining establishments such as Laszlo's or Momo's that seem to have thrived. So what's the difference? You know, so I think that's really the question. Is strategically, how can a company position itself so that, again, it's able to attract and retain the employees? Is it the culture? Is it the benefits? Is it the relationships? As I said at the very beginning, is it the relationships among the employees that is different at these organizations that are thriving? And I mean, that's what I would tend to believe, that it's really about management style. There's a saying, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. So I think it's going to be a while until things level out, so to say. And if we ever do reach a new normal, whatever that is, I think we're still probably maybe 3 years away from that. But you know, the other thing that has changed too, though, and the other disruptor is technology. So I think as long as we have technology and advances in technology, I think we always have that risk of disruption, regardless of what industry we're in. So, you know, it's about agility. You know, Dana and I have talked about, you know, one way to promote the certificate program is to build agility within your organization. Here's why you want your employees to be aware of HR issues, for example, because it builds some agility within your organization. I think that's really, I mean, if there's, I think agility, I think organizational agility is going to be part of that new normal, whatever that new normal looks like. But no, this is, it's been very disruptive. And honestly, that's one of the reasons, though, I focused on childcare earlier, is because there's a lot of information that suggests that if a company has a well-established, affordable, accessible childcare program, that will help bring you know, some of the female workers back into the workforce, for example. So it's issues like that. Childcare is expensive, though, but I firmly believe, though, that if you have a quality, dependable childcare service, that the parent doesn't have to worry and think about during the day, right? When they drop off their kid, they're pretty confident the kid's still going to be there at the end of the day and be healthy, yeah, and not have scars. But I mean, so again, I mean that's part of the picture as well. That's part of this disruption as well. Childcare centers, you know, lost a lot of employees during COVID, and so yeah, it's. I think it's going to be a while until we recover, or until there's some new sense of normal. But I'm not sure that we're ever really going to achieve that. I think there's always going to be some flux.
So too. I'll open it up to our audience for any questions for Jim. Paulette?
When you're talking about the child care, that's interesting, and how it will enhance different industries. I'm wondering about the medical profession. That seems to be a real crisis right now, with so many people that, like nurses, that got really fed up with COVID, and there definitely is a shortage. When you try to get things done, it takes a whole lot longer. Would that be an effective solution there?
Childcare for the healthcare industry? Yes. One of the great benefits or gifts, perhaps. My wife is a nurse. My daughter is a nurse. In fact, they both work at Bryan East, and and I have 2 grandkids, and our grandchildren had the same teachers at the Bryan Daycare Center that our daughter and son did. So that was really a gift to us, but it really brought home to us, though, the value of that. So the answer is yes. I mean, depending upon where you work, you know, the organization might already have access and provide that service, and you know, Bryan's a good example of that. But there are other healthcare facilities that it would be more of a challenge, and that might appear perhaps in more of an urban setting, for example. But I think the provision, the accessibility of affordable childcare services, I think that's true for any industry, whether it's healthcare, again, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's financial, just again, affordability, accessibility, but that peace of mind that the employee has. Is a part of the solution for the healthcare industry? I would say yes. Part of it too is wages. Part of it too, though, is the culture and how supportive the organization is of the employees, just because of how, again, in some cases COVID has brought out the best in people, and in some cases COVID has brought out the worst in people, and I think that's part of the reason too why I think there's been some exodus from the healthcare field. So I think there are a variety of factors there.
Jody, have you ever read Florence Prescription?
No.
Okay, it's basically HR in healthcare field, and it's by Joe Ty
Okay.
from Iowa, and it's a really good read for the fact that it puts it in the everyday, speaking like fictional era, but it deals with real life problems like retaining, dealing with different employees. How can we help them work together rather than So it's a really good, easy read.
Does part of that book also focus on the physician-employee
Yes.
relationship as well? Because I mean that's another huge factor in the healthcare industry as well, is not only how well one nurse gets along with another nurse that might be on the same staff, but it's also that interaction with the physicians and the other providers as well. I mean those interactions can create some interesting dynamics. So that would be part of that scenario, that situation as well.
Yeah, it's not focused on one doctor, one employer. It's focused on the whole system. How can we get them to work together? Because when they do, patients benefit.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, agreed.
So, we are in strange times with employees, and I think we're starting to see businesses get real creative in how they're going to recruit and retain employees, and not only businesses, but educational institutions as well. Example, the Kawasaki and their shift, to where it's not a 40-hour work week. They've reduced the hours and allowed, instead of putting children in daycare, to allow the parent to be there to get them to school and to pick them up from school. And Wayne State College or University has their program that they've instituted now, where they've shifted 18 credit hours of a student's degree to being an internship their senior year. So they have accelerated classroom work the first 3 years. And last year is full internship, where they moved to Norfolk, live in a apartment complex that is of, peers their age, and so that they can not only have experience at work, but see there's a culture of people in the area for them to give them more reason to stay and work in the area. Do you see any more of those types of innovations surfacing out there?
It's hard for me to mention any specific ones right now. I do want to repeat, excuse me, I do want to repeat what I said about Huddle, for example, the on-site childcare service. But, I would encourage, as possible, I would encourage industries to certainly consider that. Talk about disruption and how can we be innovative? What services can we offer? What programs can we design that are going to be different? Not all industries basically can afford certain changes or certain adjustments. I mean, especially if you're dependent upon, although Kawasaki seems to be an outlier, might be one of the outliers, but a manufacturing setting, for example, there might be less flexibility within a manufacturing center facility than there would be with, for a financial institution, for example, or even a medical facility. So, I would certainly encourage companies and organizations to consider what changes, what possibilities there might be. And again, it goes back to listening to the employees, but also goes back to listening to the stakeholders. Who has an interest in what you're doing? Who has an interest in the product or service that you provide? And what are they saying? What's the feedback from the stakeholders as well? So I can't think of any other specific examples right now. But yeah, I mean, even working from home, some organizations have, just dragged their feet, and no way are we going to let employees work from home. Well, they had no choice 3 years ago or 2 years ago. I forget the organization, but just the other day the headline was they are requiring employees to come back to the office. Now, I think in that situation, it's only 3 out of 5 days of the week. I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that they're requiring employees to be at work. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, again, back to the Great Resignation, what expectations do employees have? So I think that's going to drive whatever changes we see.
Anybody have any other questions? John?
Of course. You talked about the communication and the culture related to retention. And we're having in my mind, quite a social switch in our society right now in terms of career expectations and what people want going into a career because of not only COVID, but dollars given out, all of that. What impact are you seeing on what we're coming out of from COVID? Because to your point, I think it's not going to go. COVID's going to be around. It's a virus. But I won't wait.
Yeah, it's an endemic. It's no longer a pandemic. It's an endemic.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. And so what I'm really trying to say is, what about impact is that going to have on the people's expectations going in, and how you recruit them, and then how you retain them, and do it realistically so that your business is still profitable?
Well, my very first thought again is listening to the employees that you have on staff already. But again, create a relationship. I mean, if you're an engineering firm and you're dependent upon hiring engineering graduates from UNL or Purdue or MIT, I mean, I would suggest that as an organization, you somehow reach out to those students while they're still in school, find out what their expectations are when they come out. As I shared earlier, the students in my Wesleyan class is like, yeah, culture number one, salary number two. It's part of it is social media as well. What's trending, what's important, whatever segment of employees, whatever cohort of employees that we need to be focusing on, what's going on within that segment, within that age group, within that education group. I mean, it's trying to predict the future is in some respects, but finding out what their needs, what their expectations are as early as possible. One of the main factors relative to culture is leadership. Leadership is not necessarily responsible for creating the culture, but leadership is responsible for. I think what I want to say is leadership has a significant impact on culture, and it's whether or not the leader walks the talk. So I think that's part of it as well. That is our organization consistent relative to culture and what the expectations are, because I think that also helps drive not only recruitment but also retention. So leadership is a huge part of that.
The Dino example you gave a little bit ago, versus others. Another restaurant on 84th that I know the owners well was Mexican restaurant.
Oh, up on Holdridge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it well, I can't say it.
La Paloma.
Yes, thank you. It's an old brain. La Palomas, and they're gone. And yet there's other Mexican restaurants that are really private. Does that have a lot to do with one vision? And to me, and the creativity of being able to, I wrote down the term pivot. You used the term agility. Going forward in all areas of business and corporations, to have a leadership that thinks one creatively, two strategically, and has the ability to pivot, or has the agility to do that. What are your thoughts on the impact how that can have in creating the right kind of culture?
I think, in my opinion, I think it's significant. I can't think of his last name right now. Once a month, my wife and I go to Momo on Pioneers, near 84th and Pioneers. And it's fascinating to me. I mean, on a Wednesday night in the middle of the summer, they're packed. I mean, you have to wait for a table. So what is it about the culture at that particular restaurant? And so, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with Tony. Tony's the owner. I'm blocking on Tony's last name right now. But I plan to interview him this fall for one of my classes to try to find out a little bit more exactly what his secret sauce is. But it's a culture of mutual support. The employees have each other's backs. They help each other. They come to each other's rescue. I mean, it's really a collaborative, collective effort where the employees see value in helping each other out. So, and yes, I mean, to get to the heart of your question, yeah, I think that is all about leadership and what the expectations are. A lot of it, I think, also has to do with who they select to work there. I think that's a big part of it. But I think another major element, though, is what are the expectations of the leadership or the ownership? Absolutely.
And that goes back, my thoughts, that goes back into the leadership being in the trenches and communicating with the employees and rolling up their sleeves and be as much of a part of it as the employees are.
Agreed. And sticking with Momo as an example, that's exactly what Tony does.
Okay.
Yeah. Agreed. I interviewed for this past spring. 3 years ago, I developed a leadership course for the College of Business at UNL. And this spring, I changed it up a little bit, and I introduced interviews that I recorded. And one of them was with a colleague who I worked with at UNL, Dr. Eric Lee, who, very interesting, talk about career shift. For his entire career, he worked in higher ed as a higher ed administrator, and now he's a VP for diversity for PointsBet, online betting platform. So I'm not sure exactly how he made that shift. But to get to your point, one of the points he made, though, about the president or the owner of PointsBet is exactly that. He'll walk into the lunchroom and sit down and have lunch with the employee who is an account manager or customer rep. There's that connection. There's not much of a separation. Yeah, but it's a sense of we're in this together. It's a sense of getting to know each other on a personal basis. I'm confident those are elements to it.
I find it interesting, Jim, in what you've talked about and how there's a lot of parallels between human resources and starting your own business. Listening to your stakeholders, leadership, all of those different things that we talk about when you start your own business are things that are integral in the human resource field. Just a lot of parallels that I think are very interesting. For one last question, it doesn't have anything to do with what you talked about today, but where are some of your favorite places here in Lincoln to go to? You like to go to Momo's.
Plug for Momo.
Maybe what's your favorite place besides Momo's to go to, and do you have a favorite book?
Laszlo's is also at the top of the list. Our favorite pizza is actually Casey's.
I like Casey's pizza.
I mean,
Really
they're big. There's a lot on it, and it's affordable. I mean, it's priced well. My favorite book. I'll answer that if I can mention two authors. One is Jim Collins. His Good to Great book has always stuck with me, and it's about recruitment and it's about selection and it's about strengths of the individuals within your organization and finding that right spot for them. Peter Drucker is probably one of my favorite writers, and he's more of a management philosopher than he was. He passed away early 2000s, I think. He was more of a management philosopher than he was a management scientist. But he also focused on personal development and personal growth and knowing oneself. Because, and here's an excellent point, one of the main points, in fact, my leadership course starts out with the Clifton Strengths Assessment because it's all about knowing yourself. That's really where it starts, is what about yourself? And in my opinion, everybody is a leader. In your own way, everybody is a leader. But then it comes down to what are your strengths? And Peter Drucker focuses on that as well in terms of, what is it about yourself? You really have to understand yourself before you can be that effective leader or that effective manager. So.
Thank you for coming today, Jim. We really appreciate it. Next week, John will be our featured speaker. So thank you, everybody, for coming. If we could give a
Thank you.
round of applause to Jim, I appreciate your insight. And we will be back here same time next week and hope to see all of you here. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I have some business cards there on the table if anybody wants to follow up with me. That'd be great.